I remember.
And I remember.
I remember.
The President of the United States is dead.
And I remember.
And I remember.
November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas. A day full of smiles and promise turns tragic. But even after 50 years, memories of that day remain clear when news broke of President John F. Kennedy's assassination.
It was my second year to teach, and I was teaching journalism at Lubbock High School. And I had this one student, and she was dating a guy from Monterey, and she was always late coming back. Well, on that day, she came in late, and I said, "Where have you been? Why are you late?" And she said, "Well, the president's been shot." And I thought, well, that's a little different. Obviously, there wasn't much else that happened at school that day because people were, just in a trance almost over it. It was such a tragedy.
I was at Memorial Middle School in Kingsville, Texas, and very clearly remember walking down the hall, and one of my classmates came out. She was crying. She was traveling down the same hall, and she had said, "The president has been shot."
I remember what room I was in at Bledsoe Hall when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Crowds gathered around, people were talking about it, and it was real hushed, and there were a few people that were very emotional and shed some tears, and it was one of those days you just couldn't believe it happened.
I was in Northwest Indiana, and I was in a senior high school and leaving the room where the teachers ate lunch to go back to my class of juniors in English. And as I exited the room, I bumped into the principal who said, "The president's been shot." And it was a staggering, sobering silence.
When I was a young man, my father owned a service station right down from Hobby Airport. And JFK was coming into town the night before the assassination to Houston. And I remember seeing the president go by in the motorcade. My mother screamed, "Hi, Jack!" And he and Mrs. Kennedy turned around. They were only about 10 or 15 feet away from us. And they both smiled very big and they waved at us. And I can still see that vision in my mind's eye. And they were gone.
I was on my way to the National Guard Armory on that Friday when the news came over the radio that President Kennedy had been shot and then subsequently that he had died. And so it turned out to be sort of fortuitous for me that I was already on my way to the National Guard Armory and in uniform, because after that, the entire National Guard unit was called in because no one knew exactly what President Kennedy's death meant.
My father was highly involved with the political scene of South Texas. At that point in time, the Kennedy mission on civil rights meant so much. I think the thing that I remember most about that, and that's probably where I have my clearest memories, my father pointing out that it may be that the promise is lost, the fear that it was lost. And he had grown up in a period of time when there was very strong Jim Crow activity in the state. This young man, this young president was bringing us something fresh, a different perspective. And with his death, the question becomes, is it gone?
And so it was a very important and critical day in my life just to see the president, and then of course the next day to feel like you had some connection with this event that literally changed U.S. and world history.
None of us had lived through an assassination. We'd read about Lincoln, Garfield, those kinds of things, but none of us had actually ever experienced it. And for a president to actually be shot and killed was just such a traumatic and momentous event.
And I think that was the crux, not just the loss of a young and promising life, but also the loss of innocence.